I, 26F, have a sister named Chloe. She was always the center of our family's universe. I was the quiet one, the responsible one. Chloe was the star, the one who got whatever she wanted. When she got engaged, it was no different. The entire world, or at least my mother's world, began to revolve around Chloe's wedding. I was happy for her, truly, but I was also tired. Tired of being treated like an afterthought, a convenient resource to be used and then discarded. The final straw came at her bridal shower, an event held in the one place on earth that was supposed to be my sanctuary, my business. My flower shop, the blooming soul, was my pride and joy. I had built it from nothing. I poured my savings, my time, and every ounce of my energy into its walls. When Chloe announced her engagement, my mother immediately suggested we host the bridal shower there. She framed it as a wonderful opportunity for me. Think of the exposure, Ava, she had said, her voice full of false enthusiasm. All of Chloe's wealthy friends will see your lovely little shop. I knew it was a bad idea. I knew they would take over and treat my business like their personal party space. But I agreed. I did it for the sake of peace. I did it because a small, hopeful part of me thought that maybe this time they would see me. They would see what I had built and be proud. I was wrong. The day of the shower was chaos. My mother and Chloe had rearranged everything without asking me. My carefully curated displays were shoved into corners. They had brought in their own decorations, cheap, glittery things that clashed with the natural aesthetic of my shop. They treated my staff, my wonderful, hard-working employees, like servants. I bit my tongue through most of it. I smiled when I was supposed to smile. I fetched drinks. I tried to be the supportive sister, the dutiful daughter. The moment it all broke was small, almost insignificant to anyone else. Chloe was talking to one of her bridesmaids, complaining loudly about the color of the roses in an arrangement. "They're more of a peach than a blush," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Ava probably got a discount on them. My manager, Leo, a kind man who had been with me from the start, overheard her. He quietly approached and said, "Actually, Chloe, Ava specifically sourced those from a premium grower for you. They're called Sweet Juliet roses, and they're quite expensive." Chloe turned on him. Her smile vanished, replaced by a cold glare. "I don't remember asking for your opinion," she snapped. "Just do your job and stay out of the way." The cruelty in her voice was stunning. It was one thing to insult me, but to speak to my staff that way in my own shop was a line I couldn't ignore. I stepped forward. My voice was low, but steady. "Chloe, you can't speak to Leo like that," I said. "He works for me, and he deserves respect." Everyone went quiet. All eyes were on us. Chloe's face flushed with anger. She looked at me as if I were a bug she wanted to crush. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hiss that only I could hear. "Do not embarrass me, Ava," she said. "Do not ruin my big day." That was it. Those words. Not an apology. Not a moment of reflection. Just pure, unadulterated selfishness. She saw my defense of another human being as an attempt to ruin her party. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The years of quiet resentment, of swallowing my feelings for the sake of family peace, it all just evaporated. I was done. I looked at her and, for the first time, I didn't see my sister. I saw a stranger, a spoiled, cruel stranger who was using my kindness as a weapon against me. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked away. I walked past the tables of her friends, past my mother who was shooting daggers at me with her eyes, and headed for the door. I needed to get out of there. I needed to breathe air that wasn't thick with her entitlement. As I reached the front door, my hand on the handle, a voice stopped me.
"Mom."
It was Leo. He had followed me. His face was filled with concern. He looked from me back towards the party, then leaned in closer. "Ma'am, as the owner," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "would you like us to end the event?" I froze. The question hung in the air, a shocking, beautiful possibility. The power to end it. The power to stop the charade. I had been so focused on escaping that I hadn't even considered it. This was my shop. My rules. They weren't guests. They were clients who were behaving abominably in my place of business. I looked at Leo, and I saw the loyalty in his eyes. He knew what they were doing was wrong. He was giving me an out, but it was more than that. He was reminding me of who I was. I wasn't just Chloe's sister. I was the owner of this business. I took a deep breath. The decision felt monumental. Ending the party would be a declaration of war. My family would never forgive me. But what was there to forgive? Their love was so conditional it felt more like a transaction, and I was tired of paying the price. I looked back at the party. Chloe was now laughing, the center of attention again, the brief unpleasantness already forgotten. She had no idea what was coming. She had no idea that her big day was about to come to a very abrupt end. My mind was racing. I couldn't just have Leo shut it down. That felt too simple, too reactionary. If I was going to do this, I needed to do it right. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening. Chloe's comment and her treatment of Leo were just the tip of the iceberg. The feeling in my gut told me there was more, something deeper and more calculated going on. I needed to be sure. I needed to be strategic. Leo, I said, my voice still quiet. Give me 5 minutes. Just stand by. He nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Of course, Ava. Take your time. I slipped out the front door, the little bell chiming softly behind me. The cool afternoon air was a welcome relief. I leaned against the brick wall of my shop, the shop I had painted myself, and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking slightly. I scrolled through my contacts and found Sarah's name. Sarah was my best friend, my rock. She knew everything about my family. She had warned me this would happen. She answered on the second ring. Hey, how's the shower of the century going? She asked, her voice cheerful. It's a disaster, Sarah, I whispered, my voice cracking. A complete and utter disaster. I quickly told her what happened. The comment from Chloe, her cruelty to Leo, the whole humiliating scene. I told her about Leo's offer to shut the party down. Sarah was silent for a moment. Then she said, Good for Leo. He's a keeper. So, what are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted. If I do this, it's the nuclear option. There's no coming back from it. My mom, Chloe, they'll paint me as the villain, the jealous sister who couldn't handle her siblings' happiness. Let them, Sarah said, her voice firm. Ava, what have they ever done for you? Really? They take and they take. They take your time, your energy, your money, and now they are taking over your business and disrespecting your employees. When does it stop? It stops when you make it stop. Her words hit me hard because they were true. I had spent my entire life trying to earn their approval, trying to be good enough. But the goalposts were always moving. My success with the shop wasn't a source of pride for them. It was a resource. My home was a convenient place for them to stay when they were in town. My car was theirs to borrow. I was always the giver, and they were always the takers. You're right, I said, a new wave of resolve washing over me. But I feel like there's more to it than just this party. The way they've been acting, it feels planned. What do you mean? Sarah asked. I don't know, I said, thinking back. Just little things. My mom asking for the contact information for my main flower wholesaler last week. Chloe making a comment about how lucrative the wedding industry must be. They've been spending money like it's water, for the wedding I mean. A designer dress, a top-tier caterer, a famous photographer. My dad doesn't make that kind of money. I just assumed her fiancé, Mark, was footing the bill. Maybe he is, Sarah said. But your gut is usually right. Before you go in there and drop the bomb, maybe you should do a little digging. You're the owner. You have access to everything. Check the records. Check the security footage. See what they've been up to when you're not around. She was brilliant. Of course. My shop was equipped with a full security system, and all my booking and accounting software was on my laptop in the back office. If they were planning something, if they were using my business in a way I didn't know about, the evidence would be there. Okay, I said, my voice stronger now. Okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going back in, but I'm going to the office. I'll call you back. You got this, Seva, she said. Remember who you are. You built that place. It's yours. I hung up the phone and took another deep breath. Sarah was right. I needed to stop thinking like a hurt little sister and start thinking like a business owner. I walked back to the front door, my posture straighter this time. Leo was still there, pretending to adjust a display. He gave me a subtle nod. I nodded back and walked past him, ignoring the party completely. I could feel my mother's glare on my back, but I didn't turn around. I walked straight down the short hallway that led to the back of the shop, to my office. The office was my real sanctuary. It was small and a little cluttered, but it was mine. I closed the door, shutting out the noise of the party, and sat down at my desk. I powered on my laptop, my heart pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I would recognize it when I saw it. I started with the booking calendar. I found the entry for Chloe's shower. It was marked as a family event, no charge. That was my doing. I had told Leo not to charge them the venue fee. A knot of regret tightened in my stomach. I clicked on the event details. The contact person was listed as my mother. There were no notes, no contract attached. That was sloppy. Leo was usually meticulous about contracts, even for family. I opened the folder where we stored scanned copies of all our event contracts. I scrolled through the recent ones. Nothing for Chloe. That was odd. I made a mental note to ask Leo about it. Maybe my mother had promised to sign it and never did. It wouldn't be the first time she'd conveniently forgotten a promise. Next, I opened the accounting software. I looked at recent expenses. Everything seemed normal at first. Payments to my regular suppliers, payroll, rent. But then I decided to look at the wholesaler accounts. I had 3 main suppliers for flowers and plants. I opened the account for the biggest one, a large farm upstate that I had a great relationship with. I scanned the recent invoices. There was the order for the Sweet Juliet roses. They were indeed expensive. Then I saw it. An order that made my blood run cold. It was placed 3 days ago. It was a massive order. $10,000 worth of flowers. White orchids, Casablanca lilies, peonies, hydrangeas. It was a wedding order. A huge, lavish wedding order. The delivery date was for next month, the day before Chloe's wedding. The delivery address was Chloe's wedding venue, and the invoice was billed directly to my business account. I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. $10,000. They had used my business account to order the flowers for her entire wedding. They hadn't asked me. They hadn't even told me. They had just done it, assuming I would either not notice or be too scared to say anything. The audacity of it was breathtaking. This wasn't just disrespect. This was theft. It was fraud. My hands started to shake again, but this time it was with rage. A pure, cold rage. This was the more I had been looking for. This was the plan. They were going to use my business to fund her dream wedding. And then what? Hope I just quietly paid the bill. Present it to me as a gift after the fact. I needed more proof. I needed to know how they did it. I minimized the accounting software and opened the security camera footage. The system recorded everything, and the files were stored on a cloud server. I navigated to the date the order was placed. I scrolled through the timeline, looking for activity in the office. And there it was. Mid-afternoon. I had been out of the shop at a meeting with a new corporate client. The footage showed my mother walking into my office. She looked around, then sat down at my desk. She used my computer. I watched, my stomach churning, as she navigated to the wholesaler's website, a site I had left logged in. She knew my password for everything else was the name of my first dog. She probably guessed it. She spent nearly 30 minutes on the site, adding items to the cart. Then I saw her pick up the phone on my desk. She was talking to someone, likely the sales rep at the farm, confirming the massive order. She was so calm, so confident, as if she had every right to be there, spending my money. After she hung up, she logged out and wiped the keyboard with her sleeve. Then she walked out of the office as if nothing had happened. The rage was now a fire in my veins. This was premeditated. This was a calculated betrayal by my own mother for the benefit of my sister. My sister, who was right now not 50 feet away, basking in the glory of a party I was hosting for free after she had insulted me and my staff. I saved a copy of the video file to a USB drive. I downloaded the invoice from the wholesaler. I printed it out. I sat there for a moment, the evidence in my hands, and I felt a strange sense of calm descend upon me. The hurt was still there, but it was overshadowed by a crystal-clear sense of purpose. I knew exactly what I had to do. There would be no more quiet compliance. There would be no more swallowing my pride for the sake of peace. The peace was a lie anyway. Today, it was all going to come out. I stood up, holding the printed invoice in my hand. I walked to the office door and opened it. The sounds of the party washed over me again, but now they sounded different. They sounded like a countdown. I walked back down the hall.
A few people noticed me this time.
An aunt gave me a questioning look. I ignored her. I walked to the center of the main showroom, right next to the table where Chloe was opening her gifts. She was holding up a piece of lingerie, laughing with her friends. My mother was standing beside her, beaming with pride. I waited for the laughter to die down. Then I cleared my throat. It was a small sound, but in the sudden silence, it was as loud as a gunshot. Every eye in the room turned to me. Chloe looked annoyed. "What is it, Ava?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Are you going to stand there sulking all day?" "No," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I'm not sulking. I just have a question for you, Chloe. And for you, Mom." My mother's smile tightened. "Ava, this is not the time or the place," she said through gritted teeth. "Oh, I think it is the perfect time and place," I replied. I held up the invoice. I was just in my office, paying some bills for my lovely little shop, and I came across this. I was hoping one of you could explain it to me. Chloe squinted at the paper. "I can't see what that is from here," she said dismissively. "Whatever it is, can it wait?" "No," I said. "It can't wait. It's an invoice for $10,000. For flowers. Specifically for white orchids, Casablanca lilies, and peonies. Sound familiar? It's the flower order for your wedding, Chloe. And it's been charged to my business account." The silence in the room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. Chloe's face went pale. My mother's jaw dropped. The guests were looking back and forth between us, their expressions a mixture of confusion and morbid curiosity. I don't know what you're talking about," Chloe stammered. "That's a mistake. Mark is handling the flowers." Mark, her fiancé, who had been talking to some friends in the corner, looked over, his brow furrowed. "What's going on?" he asked. "Your fiancé seems to think you're paying for the wedding flowers, Mark," I said, turning to him. "But this invoice, from my supplier, says otherwise. It says my company is paying for them. And I certainly didn't approve this." My mother finally found her voice. She stepped forward, trying to take control of the situation. "Ava, you are causing a scene," she hissed. "You are embarrassing your sister."
"We were going to talk to you about that."
"It was going to be your wedding gift to her." The lie was so audacious, so shameless, that I almost laughed. "My gift," I said, my voice rising slightly. "You are going to gift your daughter $10,000 of my money without my permission? You call that a gift? I call it theft. I have security footage of you, Mom, in my office, using my computer, placing this order behind my back." My mother recoiled as if I had slapped her. "You are lying," she whispered, her eyes wide with panic. "You would do anything to ruin this for your sister. You've always been jealous of her." "Jealous?" I asked. The word was so absurd it barely registered. Jealous of what? Her entitlement? Her cruelty? The way she treats the people around her? "No, I'm not jealous.
I am angry."
I'm angry that you both seem to think that I exist solely to fund our lifestyle. That my hard work, my business, is just a piggy bank for you to raid whenever you feel like it." I turned my attention back to Chloe. She was staring at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hatred. "How could you do this?" she whispered. "This is my bridal shower. This is my place of business," I shot back. "A place where you insulted my staff and disrespected my property. You are so worried about me ruining your big day, but you know what, Chloe? You've been ruining my days for years. Every time you took without asking. Every time you belittled my accomplishments. Every time you made me feel small so you could feel big. I took a breath, letting my words sink in. The guests were now actively whispering. Some looked horrified, others deeply uncomfortable. Chloe's friends looked at her with pity, which I knew would be worse than anger for her.
Mark walked over to me.
He looked at the invoice in my hand, then at Chloe, then at my mother. Is this true? He asked my mother directly. My mother sputtered. It's a misunderstanding. Ava is twisting things. She's always been dramatic. Is it true that you used her business account without her permission? Mark pressed, his voice firm. He was a decent man, I had always thought. Maybe a little blind to Chloe's faults, but not a bad person. Now, his eyes were wide open. Before my mother could answer, I made my final move. I turned and looked towards the front of the shop, where Leo was standing, watching the entire scene unfold. I raised my voice, so everyone could hear me clearly.
Leo, I said.
Our agreement for this private event has been breached. The clients have engaged in fraudulent activity on my business accounts and have created a hostile environment for my staff. The party is over. Please begin escorting the guests out. This time, the gasp was audible. The shock rippled through the room. Chloe looked like she was going to be sick. You can't do that, she shrieked. You can't kick my guests out. Watch me, I said, my voice as cold as ice. This is my shop. My rules. And my final rule for today is, everyone out.
Now.
Leo nodded grimly. He gestured to the other 2 staff members who were working the event.
You heard her, he said.
The event is concluded. Please gather your belongings and exit the premises. The staff, who had endured my family's condescension all day, moved with an efficiency that was almost joyful. They started politely, but firmly asking people to leave. The guests, caught in the crossfire of a family implosion, were more than happy to comply. They grabbed their purses and coats, offering awkward, mumbled apologies as they scurried out the door. No one wanted to be in that room anymore. My mother stood frozen, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. I will never forgive you for this, Ava, she seethed. You have humiliated this family. No, I said, looking her straight in the eye. You did that when you decided to steal from your own daughter. You humiliated yourself. Chloe finally broke. She burst into tears, not the quiet, sad kind, but loud, ugly sobs of rage and frustration. You ruined everything, she wailed, throwing a small gift box on the floor. I hate you. I hate you. Mark went to her side, but he didn't put his arm around her. He just stood there, looking down at the crying woman who was his fiancée. His expression was unreadable.
He looked over at me.
Ava, he started. I had no idea. I know you didn't, Mark, I said, my voice softening slightly. This isn't on you. But you need to decide if this is the family you want to be a part of. I handed him the invoice.
Here.
I think you'll be needing this. He took the paper from my hand, his eyes scanning the total at the bottom.
He winced.
Within 10 minutes, the shop was almost empty. The only people left were me, my staff, my mother, Chloe, and Mark. The once festive room was a wreck, with half-opened gifts, plates of uneaten food, and wilting decorations. The silence was heavy and suffocating. My mother, having recovered from her initial shock, switched tactics. The rage was replaced by a cloying, manipulative sweetness. She approached me, her hands outstretched. Ava, darling, she said, her voice trembling. Let's not do this. We're family. We can sort this out. Your sister is just stressed. The wedding. It's a lot of pressure. I stepped back, away from her touch. Do not call me darling, I said. And do not use stress as an excuse for grand larceny. You committed fraud, Mom. You used my business to steal $10,000. That's not stress. That's a crime. It was a loan, she insisted, her voice rising in desperation. We were going to pay you back. After the wedding, once things settled down. A loan requires asking first, I said flatly.
You didn't ask.
You snuck into my office and did it behind my back. You lied. There is no sorting this out. Not today. Chloe, seeing her mother's approach fail, tried a different one. The tears stopped as quickly as they had started. Her face hardened.
Fine, she spat.
You want to be a petty, vindictive shrew?
Fine. But you'll be sorry.
When Dad hears what you did, how you embarrass me in front of all my friends. What will he hear? I interrupted. That I stopped you from stealing from me? My father may be blind to a lot of your faults, Chloe, but he's an honest man. I wonder what he'll think when I show him the invoice and the security footage. That shut her up. The threat of involving my father, the one person whose opinion they both still cared about, was a direct hit. They knew he wouldn't stand for this. He was old-fashioned about money and honor. What they had done would horrify him. Mark finally spoke up. He looked at Chloe, his voice devoid of all its earlier warmth. Chloe, we need to go, he said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. But my gifts, she protested, gesturing to the pile on the table. We'll get them later, he said, his jaw tight. We are leaving. Now he looked at me one last time. Ava, I am so sorry. Then he took a stunned Chloe by the arm and practically dragged her out of the shop. Now it was just my mother and me. She stared at me, her expression unreadable. All the anger, all the manipulation, seemed to have drained out of her, leaving behind something hollow and ugly. You've destroyed everything, she said, her voice a hollow echo in the empty room. I didn't destroy anything that wasn't already broken, I replied. You and Chloe did that. I just turned on the lights so we could all see the damage. She just shook her head slowly, then turned and walked out the door without another word. The little bell chimed, and then there was silence. I stood there for a long moment, in the wreckage of the party. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. And a part of me did. But mostly I just felt tired. So incredibly tired. Leo came over to me. Are you okay, Ava? He asked gently. I looked at him and managed a small, weary smile. I will be, I said. Thank you, Leo. For everything. For having my back. Always, he said. This is your place. I won't let anyone disrespect you here. He looked around at the mess. Don't worry about this. Me and the team will get it cleaned up. You should go home and rest. I wanted to protest, to help, but I knew he was right. I was emotionally drained. Okay, I said. Let me just grab my things from the office. In the office, I sat down at my desk and put my head in my hands. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a deep, aching sadness. I had stood up for myself, yes. But in doing so, I had probably blown up my family forever. Was it worth it? My phone buzzed. It was Sarah. So, the text read. I called her. I did it. I said, my voice thick with emotion. I kicked them all out. I confronted them about the money. Oh my God, Ava. Tell me everything. I recounted the entire scene, from the confrontation to my mother's final, hollow words. Sarah listened patiently, interjecting with gasps and exclamations of, no, they did not, and good for you. When I was done, she was quiet for a moment. I am so proud of you, she said, her voice full of genuine warmth. That took more courage than you know. You did the right thing. You stood up for yourself and your business. It feels awful, though, I confessed. It feels like I just detonated a bomb in the middle of my own life. Sometimes, that's what it takes to clear out the rot, she said wisely. They built a toxic structure, and you just refuse to live in it anymore. It's going to hurt for a while. But you're going to build something new and better in its place. I promise. We talked for a little while longer, and by the time I hung up, I felt a little stronger. She was right. This was painful, but it was necessary. The relationship I thought I had with my mother and sister was an illusion. Today, I had just been forced to see the truth. I packed up my laptop and my purse. As I was about to leave, I noticed the USB drive on my desk, the one with the security footage. I picked it up and put it in my pocket. I had a feeling I might need it again. When I walked out of the office, The shop was already starting to look like itself again. Leo and the team had cleared away most of the party debris. The awful glittery decorations were in a trash bag by the door. The scent of flowers was starting to overpower the lingering smell of perfume and cake. It was my sanctuary again. The next few days were quiet. Eerily so. I didn't hear a word from my mother or Chloe. I assumed they were either plotting their revenge or trying to figure out how to spin the story to the rest of the family. I half expected a call from my father, but the phone remained silent. It was a strange limbo, a cold war after the big battle. I threw myself into my work. I redesigned the shop's layout, bringing back my favorite displays. I spent hours in the greenhouse, tending to my orchids. The work was therapeutic. It was a reminder of what I had built, what was mine, what was real. A few days after the shower, one of my aunts, my mother's sister, called me. I braced myself for a lecture. "Ava, dear," she said, her voice hesitant. "I just wanted to. Well, I was at the shower. And I wanted to say,
I'm sorry.
I was so surprised I didn't know what to say. Sorry for what?
For not seeing it, she said.
Your mother, she's been telling everyone for years that you were struggling. That the shop was just a little hobby that was barely staying afloat. She said she and Chloe were trying to help you, to give you business. We all believed her.
But what I saw on Saturday,
that wasn't help. That was cruel. Her words were like a bomb on a raw wound. She said I was struggling? I asked, incredulous. My business was thriving. I had just signed 2 major corporate contracts. I was planning to expand next year. Yes, my aunt confirmed. She painted a picture of you as this fragile, artsy girl who couldn't handle the real world. That she had to step in and manage things. After what you said about the invoice.
It all makes sense now.
The way she was always helping you. She was using you. We talked for a little while longer. She told me that the story was spreading through the family, but not the one my mother was trying to tell. People who were there were talking about what they saw. My mother's lies were starting to unravel. You were very brave, Ava, my aunt said before she hung up. Don't let her make you doubt that. That phone call was a turning point. It made me realize that I wasn't the villain in this story. My mother and sister had spent years carefully crafting a narrative, and I had just blown it up with the truth. The following week, I received a letter from a lawyer. It was from Mark's family lawyer. My heart sank. I thought he was suing me for defamation or something. But the letter wasn't threatening. It was an inquiry. It stated that Mark had called off the wedding. He had confronted Chloe about the invoice and the other deceptions, and she had admitted to everything. The letter was a formal request for a copy of the $10,000 invoice and any other evidence of financial malfeasance, as Mark was now trying to untangle his finances from Chloe's. I sat at my desk, the letter in my hand, and a slow smile spread across my face. He had left her. The dream wedding, the perfect life she had been planning on the back of my business and his money, it was all gone. It was a harsh consequence, but it was a just one. I sent his lawyer everything. The invoice, a sworn statement about the events, and a link to the cloud-stored video of my mother in my office. There was no ambiguity. The evidence was ironclad. With the legal request handled, there was still the matter of the $10,000. I knew my mother and Chloe didn't have that kind of money, but I wasn't going to let it go. It was the principle of the matter. I had my own lawyer draft a formal letter to my mother and Chloe, demanding full repayment within 30 days, or I would pursue legal action. I sent it via registered mail. The silence that followed was even deeper than before. I knew the letter had been received, but there was no response. No angry phone call. No tearful plea for forgiveness. Just nothing. It was during this time that I finally heard from my father. He called me one evening, his voice heavy. Ava, he said, your mother told me her side of the story. And then your aunt called me. And then I got a very enlightening package from a lawyer I've never heard of. I've seen the video. I held my breath. And he sighed, a long, weary sound. I am so sorry, Ava. I am so deeply, deeply sorry. I have been blind. I let your mother and sister. I let them get away with too much for too long. I didn't see what they were doing to you. I failed you as a father. Tears pricked my eyes. It was the first time in my life I had ever heard him admit any fault. It's not your fault, Dad, I said, my voice thick. It is, he insisted. It is my fault for not paying closer attention. For letting the peace be kept at your expense. That's over now, he paused. Your mother and I are separating. And I'm selling the house. I'm going to make sure you get every penny that they owe you, even if I have to pay it myself. The news was shocking. A divorce. Selling my childhood home. It was the end of an era. The end of the family as I knew it. But as sad as it was, it also felt
right.
It felt like the final, necessary consequence of all their actions. The family unit I had been trying so hard to protect was a sham. Now the truth was out, and we were all free from it. Over the next few months, things changed rapidly. My father was true to his word. He sold a house and sent me a check for the full $10,000, plus an extra $5,000 for damages. I tried to refuse the extra money, but he insisted. It's the least I can do, he said. Start fresh, Ava. Build something wonderful. My mother and Chloe moved into a small apartment together. From what I heard through the grapevine, it was a tense arrangement. Chloe was no longer the blushing bride-to-be. She was a single woman with a tarnished reputation and no access to my father's or my money. She had to get a job, a real 9-to-5 job in retail. My mother, without my father to manage or me to exploit, seemed lost. Their power had been derived from their control over others, and now they had no one left to control but each other. I saw my father regularly. We started to build a new relationship, one based on honesty and mutual respect. He would come to the shop sometimes, not to help, but just to sit and have a cup of coffee with me. He would look around at what I had built, and I could see the genuine pride in his eyes. It was a feeling I had craved my whole life, and now I finally had it. One afternoon, about 6 months after the disastrous bridal shower, I was working in the shop when the little bell over the door chimed. I looked up, and my heart stopped for a second. It was Chloe. I hadn't seen her since that day. She looked different. Thinner. Tired. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple dress that looked like it was from a department store. Her hair wasn't perfectly styled. She looked ordinary. She stood there by the door, looking around the shop as if seeing it for the first time. Leo, who was working the counter, tensed up, ready to ask her to leave. I gave him a small shake of my head. It was okay. Chloe walked slowly towards me.
She didn't look me in the eye.
She stared at a pot of lavender on a table between us. The shop looks nice, she said, her voice small. Thanks, I replied, my voice neutral. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. But I wasn't going to be cruel either. I was just
done.
I came to apologize, she said, still not looking at me. For what I did.
For the money.
For how I treated you. For everything. I waited. The apology felt rehearsed hollow. It was wrong, she continued. I was a monster. Mom and we got carried away. We thought we were entitled to it. To your success. She finally looked up at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. But they were different from the tears of rage I had seen before. These looked real. I lost everything, Ava. I lost Mark. I lost the wedding. I lost Dad. I live in a tiny apartment with Mom, and she just complains all day. I work at a clothing store. I fold sweaters for a living. And every day, I think about what I had and what I threw away because I was a spoiled brat.
I didn't know what to say.
A part of me, the old Ava, wanted to comfort her, to say it was okay. But it wasn't okay. And I wasn't that person anymore. Thank you for the apology, Chloe, I said, my voice calm and even. I appreciate you coming here to say it. She seemed to be waiting for more. For forgiveness. For an invitation back into my life. But I couldn't give her that. The trust was gone. The wound was too deep. Is that all? I asked. Her face fell. She understood. There was no going back. Yeah, she whispered. That's all. She turned and walked out of the shop. The bell chimed her exit. I watched her go, and I didn't feel anger or pity. I just felt a quiet sense of finality. That chapter of my life was over. A few weeks later, I was having coffee with my dad. I told him about Chloe's visit. He nodded slowly.
She's learning, he said.
The hard way. Maybe one day, she'll become a person you can have in your life again. But it's up to you. You don't owe her anything. I know, I said. And I really did. For the first time, I felt truly free of the obligations and expectations that had weighed me down for so long. My business continued to flourish. The story of the bridal shower had, ironically, become a strange, sort of local legend. People came into the shop, not just for the flowers, but because they had heard about the owner who stood up for herself. I got new clients, bigger contracts. I hired more staff. Even started looking at a second location in the next town over. One day, I was in the office, looking over the plans for the new shop. Leo knocked on the door. You have a visitor, he said, a small smile on his face. I walked out to the main floor and my jaw dropped. It was Mark, Chloe's ex-fiancé. Mark, I said, surprised. What are you doing here? I was in the neighborhood, he said. And I wanted to buy some flowers. He looked a little nervous. And I also wanted to see how you were doing. After everything. I'm good, I said, and I was surprised by how true it was. I'm really good. And you?
Better, he said.
A lot better. Breaking up with Chloe was the hardest and best thing I've ever done. It was like waking up from a long, strange dream. He paused. I never properly thanked you, Ava. You saved me from making a huge mistake. You don't have to thank me, I said. I was just saving myself. Well, he said, smiling a genuine, warm smile. I'm glad you did. He looked around the shop. This place is amazing. It's really you. We talked for a while. It was easy, comfortable. He was different away from Chloe's influence. He was funny and smart and kind. He asked me about my expansion plans, and his eyes lit up as I described my vision. He was an architect, it turned out, and he offered some advice on the layout for the new store. When he left, he had a small bouquet of sunflowers in his hand, and my phone number in his pocket. I wasn't looking for a relationship. I was focused on my business, on my new, peaceful life. But a few days later, he called, and I agreed to have dinner with him. And then another, and another. It was slow and careful, but it was real. He had seen my family at its absolute worst, and he hadn't run away. He had seen me at my strongest, and he admired me for it. There were no games, no manipulations. Just honesty. My life now is unrecognizable from what it was a year ago. My shop, The Blooming Soul, is a success beyond my wildest dreams. I have a father who is truly proud of me. I have a friend who has always been in my corner. And I have Mark, a man who loves me for who I am, not for what he can get from me. Sometimes, I think about that day, the day of the bridal shower. I think about the anger, the humiliation, the pain. And I think about the choice I made. The choice to stop being the peacekeeper and start being the owner. It was the moment I took my power back. I don't hear much about my mother and Chloe anymore. They live their small, bitter lives, and I live my big, beautiful one. I don't hate them. I don't wish them ill. I just don't think about them. They are a part of my past, a lesson I had to learn. The silence in my shop is no longer lonely. It's the sound of peace I finally bought for myself. And they finally learned the price of disrespect. It cost them everything. It gave me my freedom, and I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. The journey was excruciating, a trial by fire that tested every ounce of my resolve. Looking back, the signs were always there, subtle at first, like faint cracks in a foundation. My mother's casual dismissal of my business achievements, framing my hard-won success as a cute little hobby, Chloe's habit of borrowing expensive things and returning them damaged, or not at all, with a flippant apology that was more insult than remorse. I had spent a lifetime making myself smaller to accommodate their larger-than-life personalities. I was the sensible, reliable backdrop against which Chloe's dramatic life could unfold. Her triumphs were family triumphs. My triumphs were quiet, personal things, not to be made a fuss over. The bridal shower was supposed to be the culmination of this dynamic. My most significant personal achievement, my business, was to be reduced to a pretty stage for her most significant personal event. The days leading up to the shower were a masterclass in their casual cruelty. My mother would call me with a list of demands, never requests. Ava, we need you to clear out the front window display. Chloe wants to put a big, future Mrs. Thompson banner there. It didn't matter that the window display was a custom installation for a local artist that was bringing in significant foot traffic. My business needs were secondary to Chloe's bridal whims. I remember one specific phone call a week before the party. Chloe was on the line, complaining about the playlist I had put together. It's all so sleepy, Ava. Can we get something with a beat? My friends want to have fun, not take a nap. I had curated a list of soft, instrumental music that complemented the serene atmosphere of my shop. Chloe, it's a flower shop, not a nightclub, I had said, trying to keep my voice light. A loud beat might be a bit much. There was a pause, and then she said, in a voice dripping with condescension, "Don't worry your little head about it, Mom, and I will handle the music. You just focus on not killing the plants before Saturday," she laughed, as if she had made a clever joke. I just stood there, phone in hand, feeling that familiar sting of being belittled. It was 1,000 tiny cuts like that over years that had left me emotionally bleeding out long before the final, deep wound of the shower. The confrontation itself felt surreal, like an out-of-body experience. As I stood there with the invoice in my hand, watching the carefully constructed masks of my mother and sister crumble, I felt a profound sense of detachment. I wasn't an angry daughter or a jealous sister anymore. I was a CEO defending her company from a hostile takeover. Every lie they told, every attempt to gaslight me, only strengthened my resolve. When my mother claimed the $10,000 order was meant to be a gift, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. She was improvising, throwing out any lie she could think of to regain control. But the lie was too big, too unbelievable. The guests, who had moments before been cooing over crystal wine glasses and expensive lingerie, were now witnesses to a different kind of drama. They were watching a family implode, and they were seeing my mother not as the gracious hostess, but as a cornered liar. The aftermath was messier and more painful than I could have imagined. Kicking them out was the climax, but the resolution was a long, drawn-out process of setting boundaries and dealing with the fallout. The first few weeks were the hardest. I was bombarded with text messages from unknown numbers, flying monkeys sent by my mother to guilt-trip me. "Your mother is heartbroken. Chloe is devastated. How could you be so cruel to your own family?" I blocked every number. I refused to engage. Sarah was my gatekeeper, screening my calls and filtering out the noise. She brought me food, made sure I was sleeping, and reminded me constantly that I had done the right thing. "They are not sad because they hurt you, Ava," she told me one night as we sat in my quiet, empty shop. "They are angry because you took away their favorite toy." My father's intervention was the real game changer. His decision to leave my mother wasn't just about the money. He told me later that the security footage was the final, undeniable proof of a pattern he had been willfully ignoring for 30 years. He saw in my mother's calm, calculated actions in my office a woman he didn't recognize, a woman capable of a level of deceit that he couldn't live with anymore. His apology to me was not just for this incident, but for his complicity in the entire family dynamic. It was a moment of profound healing for both of us. Watching Chloe's life unravel was a complex experience. There was no joy in her pain, but there was a sense of grim satisfaction, a feeling that the universe was finally balancing the scales. Her identity was so wrapped up in being the pampered princess, the bride-to-be, that when those things were stripped away, she had nothing left. Her apology, when it finally came, was the desperate plea of someone who had hit rock bottom. I accepted it, not for her, but for me. It was the final piece of closure I needed to move on completely. My relationship with Mark grew from the ashes of that disaster. We never talked much about Chloe. There was an unspoken understanding between us. We had both been collateral damage in her storm, and we had found a quiet harbor in each other. He celebrated my successes with a genuine joy that was still new to me. He listened to my ideas, respected my ambition, and saw my strength not as a threat, but as something to be cherished. The expansion of my business became a symbol of my own growth. The new store was bigger, brighter, and more ambitious than the first. Mark helped with the designs, and my father, now retired, helped with the construction. It became a new kind of family project, one built on love and support, not obligation and resentment. The day we opened the second location of The Blooming Soul was one of the happiest of my life. The store was filled with friends, loyal customers, and my new, true family. My father stood beside me, beaming. Sarah was popping a bottle of champagne, and Mark was holding my hand, his eyes reflecting the same pride I saw in my dad's. As I looked out at the crowd, at the beautiful space I had created, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. It was a path paved with pain and betrayal, but it had led me to this moment of pure, unadulterated joy. I had lost a sister and a mother, but I had found myself. I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from the people who refuse to love you back. The bell over the door of the new shop chimed, a bright, clear sound. It wasn't a sound of warning or escape anymore. It was the sound of a new beginning. I had taken the ruins of my past and built a garden. And in that garden, I was finally free to bloom.